The story of St. Lawrence is one of the most horrific and unbelievable events in ancient history. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a rebel. He didn't rise up with a sword or rally an army. He was a man of peace, a servant of the poor, a humble figure walking the dusty streets of Rome with a loaf of bread in one hand and a prayer in his heart. But in the brutal days of the Roman Empire, even kindness could get you killed. This isn't just a story about death. It's about defiance, about faith in the face of terror, about a final moment so shocking, so surreal, that people still whisper about it more than 1,700 years later. St. Lawrence didn't just die. He turned his death into a statement. This is a true and truly horrifying story of St. Lawrence. Lawrence wasn't born in Rome. He came from Hispania, what we now call Spain, near a small Roman town called Huesca. Born around AD 225, Lawrence grew up during one of the most dangerous times to be a Christian. At that time, Christianity was still illegal in the Roman Empire. Followers of Jesus were considered rebels, enemies of the state, and faced constant persecution. But despite the risks, Lawrence's family was devout. They raised him with love, humility, and unwavering faith. From a young age, he showed a deep sense of compassion for the sick and forgotten. He didn't hunger for power. He didn't care about Roman politics or wealth. What he wanted was to serve. Eventually, as a young man, Lawrence made his way to Rome, the beating heart of the empire. It was there he met a man who would change the course of his life. Sixtus II. Sixtus wasn't just a teacher. He was a pope, and he saw something in Lawrence, something rare, a quiet strength, a purity of purpose. Sixtus appointed him one of the 7 deacons of Rome, one of the highest positions in the early church. It was a sacred responsibility. Lawrence was now in charge of caring for the poor, distributing alms, protecting church property, and aiding the sick. But Lawrence didn't wear fine robes or hold court in palaces. You'd find him in back alleys, kneeling beside beggars. You'd find him handing food to lepers and comforting women whose husbands had been taken by the empire. To Lawrence, the church's real wealth wasn't its relics or chalices. It was its people. But while Lawrence served quietly, a storm was building. In AD 258, Rome changed. Emperor Valerian issued a terrifying new decree. It wasn't about foreign wars or political reform. It was aimed directly at the church. All bishops, priests, and deacons must die. Valerian saw Christianity as a growing threat, a rebellion in slow motion. Christians refused to worship the Roman gods. They rejected imperial cults. They cared for the poor, the sick, and the enslaved, all of which made them dangerous in the eyes of the empire. On August 6th of that year, Roman soldiers burst into a church during Massachusetts Pope Sixtus II, Lawrence's mentor, was arrested on the spot. Within minutes, he was executed in front of the congregation. Right there by the altar, Lawrence, watching in horror, rushed to the scene. According to ancient records, he cried out to his beloved pope, "Father, where are you going without your deacon?" Sixtus looked at him, wounded and weak, and said, "You will follow me soon." It wasn't a warning. It was a prophecy. With the pope dead and many church leaders gone, Lawrence, just 33 years old, was now one of the last surviving deacons in Rome. The responsibility of the Christian community had fallen squarely on his shoulders. Then came the summons. The Roman prefect demanded Lawrence present himself at once and hand over the treasures of the church. The prefect meant the gold, silver, artifacts, and sacred vessels believed to be stored within Christian communities. But Lawrence had something else in mind. When Lawrence was brought before the prefect, he didn't resist. He didn't argue. Instead, he asked for time, 3 days, to gather the church's wealth. It was granted, and what Lawrence did next would become one of the boldest acts of defiance in early Christian history. Over those 3 days, Lawrence traveled through Rome, not collecting riches but visiting the poor, the crippled, the sick, widows, and orphans. He told them to gather with him, and when the time came, he returned to the prefect. But instead of gold, he brought the people. He pointed to them and said, "These are the treasures of the church." To Lawrence, this wasn't a joke. It was truth. The poor, the suffering, the forgotten, these were the people Jesus had come to save. These were the souls Lawrence had spent his life caring for. But the prefect didn't see it that way. He was furious. He thought Lawrence was mocking him, making a public mockery of Roman authority. No one humiliated Rome and lived to tell the tale. The prefect reported the insult to Emperor Valerian, and the punishment that came next wasn't just execution. It was a warning to anyone who dared defy the empire. The sentence was brutal. Lawrence wouldn't be crucified. He wouldn't be stoned or beheaded. He would be roasted alive. A massive iron grill was constructed, like a gridiron, and burning coals were placed beneath it. Slowly and deliberately, Roman guards stripped Lawrence, tied him down, and laid him on top. His skin sizzled. Smoke rose. It was a death meant to shock, to horrify, to silence anyone who might follow in his footsteps. But what happened next stunned even his executioners. Lawrence didn't scream. He didn't beg for mercy. In the middle of unimaginable pain, he cracked a joke. "Turn me over," he said. "I'm done on this side." The guards were stunned. Some laughed in disbelief. Others stared in awe. That line, that final act of defiance, would echo through history, because in the very moment Rome tried to break him, Lawrence refused to give them the satisfaction. Lawrence died on August 10th, AD 258. His body was secretly buried by the Christians who loved him in the catacombs outside the city. But his story wouldn't be buried. Within days, the tale of Lawrence's death spread like wildfire across the Christian world. People didn't just honor him for how he died. They remembered how he lived, humbly, bravely, and with unshakable love for the people no one else cared about. Years later, Emperor Constantine, the first Roman emperor to embrace Christianity, built a church on the site of Lawrence's grave. Today, that church still stands. The Basilica di San Lorenzo fuori le Mura, St. Lawrence outside the walls. St. Lawrence became the patron saint of cooks and chefs. A strange and even grim irony, but one that makes sense when you remember the grill that killed him. His symbol became the very thing that destroyed him, and yet his courage transformed that symbol into something greater. Let's pause for a second. Did it really happen like this? Did Roman soldiers really build a grill and roast a man alive? Some scholars believe the story is symbolic. They argue that the Latin word passus, meaning suffered, might have been mistranslated over time as assus, meaning roasted. Maybe the death wasn't quite as cinematic as it sounds. But here's the thing. Ancient Christian writers, including Street Ambrose and others, all recorded the story in chilling detail. And they agreed on the essential truth, that Lawrence died for his faith and that he did so with dignity, peace, and even humor. Whether he was literally grilled or not, the impact of his story was very real, because St. Lawrence stood for something Rome couldn't crush. So why does this story matter now? Because we live in a world that still tries to silence kindness, that still punishes the humble, that still values power over compassion. But Lawrence showed us another way. He didn't lead an army. He didn't start a revolt. He served, quietly, faithfully. He gave everything for his beliefs, not just in death, but in life. He protected the weak. He comforted the broken. And when faced with the most horrifying end, he stood his ground. We remember him not because he died on a grill, but because he turned fire into testimony. In modern culture, we love the rebel, the underdog, the one who stares down an empire and doesn't blink. That was Lawrence. He didn't carry a weapon. He carried bread. He didn't shout in anger. He spoke in love. And somehow that made him unstoppable. St. Lawrence didn't go quietly. He stood before the greatest empire in the ancient world and said, "These people, the poor, the broken, they are our treasure." He faced one of the most horrifying deaths in recorded history and cracked a joke. And now, more than 1,700 years later, we're still talking about him. Not because of how he died, but because of how he lived. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs courage today, and drop a comment with belief you'd never give up no matter what. And subscribe for more true, gripping stories from history.